We would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, we acknowledge the importance of the land in which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this nation home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can each, in our own way, move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. I'm connecting today from North Bay and would like to recognize that the land North Bay is on is in the territory of the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850, and that the land on which we gather is the Anishinaabe people and specifically the Nipissing First Nation. I encourage and invite you to recognize whose land that you are joining us from and let us know in the chat. To find out more about the land on which you reside, please visit native-land.ca. Hi everyone, my name is Chris Bird, LST in the Teaching Hub, and thank you again for joining us for our second training talk of Season 4, which introduces the topic of learner empowerment and engagement and brings back some phenomenal guests from previous episodes. Today, we will be discussing topics that include strategies to empower and engage students and how the pandemic has altered the ways these methods are utilized. We're also going to be clarifying the practice of mindfulness and how to properly interpret and appreciate what it is to be mindful.
Thanks for that, Chris. I'm Rob Boulay, Learning System Technologist in the Teaching Hub. I use he and him for pronouns. Before we get today's talk, I just want to shamelessly plug our upcoming episode next week on December 1st at noon. In that episode, we will discuss COVID fatigue and burnout from a variety of perspectives, including some great faculty members and some amazing leaders from the Nipissing Student Union. Don't forget, subscribe to our channel to get reminders and tune in right here on YouTube Live. Without any more delays, please join us in welcoming our moderators for today, Heather Carroll, Senior Instructional Designer in the Teaching Hub, and Dr. Sarah Dreesens, the Manager of E-Learning, also from the Global Award-winning Nipissing University Teaching Hub. Let's jump right in for what will surely be an empowering and engaging talk.
Thanks, Rob. That was really big shoes to fill. Welcome to everyone. So excited to be here in this space with these amazing panelists today, and of course with the wonderful Heather Carroll. So I am Dr. Sarah Dreesens. I'm the Manager of E-Learning in the Teaching Hub, and I'm also a Nipissing graduate. So I graduated in the PhD program, and I use she, her pronouns. Over to you, Heather.
Hi everyone, my name is Heather. I also use she, her pronouns, and I am the Senior Instructional Designer at our award-winning, as Rob mentioned, Teaching Hub. I'm so excited to introduce some of our guests today, and I will pass it back to Sarah for guest number one.
Thanks, Heather. So we have three familiar faces here to chat about learner engagement and empowerment. I am so excited to introduce our first panelist. So Dr. Anne Wagner, who I did my first teaching talk with last, I think August maybe. So Anne is an associate professor in the Department of Social Work. Anne's teaching and research interests include the areas of gender, race, social justice, higher education, critical pedagogies, and violence against women. Before joining academia, Anne worked as a clinical social worker and manager, both in community and in institutional settings. The primary focus of her work involved violence against women and youth. Eventually, Anne's love of learning led her to return to pursue a PhD in sociology and equity studies, and this really rekindled her passion for research and offered new opportunities to continue social justice work. So welcome, Anne. We're so grateful that you are returning to chat with us today.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm really thrilled to be here. And to start off, I was asked just to share some check-in practices that I use. So I'd like to provide a little context for my comments, specifically that my teaching currently occurs asynchronously online. So the way in which I do things has radically changed as a result of the pandemic. So in terms of checking in, one of my primary goals is to get students to know each other. So I do a lot of trying to get students to connect with each other. And one of the best ways I find to do that is starting off with introduce yourself, maybe share images that reflect your personality. Or as we go along, I may ask them, if you were a cartoon character, what cartoon character would you be and why? And I use those types of prompts because they're fun, students are eager to engage with them, and they're more likely to then also engage with each other. So that would be how I would facilitate check-ins online.
Thanks, Anne. And I would like to introduce our second guest, Dr. Michelann Parr, and then Michelann, for you to share a little bit about how you engage learners in the intro period. So Dr. Michelann Parr is a professor at the Schulich School of Education. She teaches pre-service teachers as well as in the PhD program. And her primary research interests include narrative forms of inquiry, identity as life work, sustainability as a relationship with self, other, and all of creation, and family engagement through community partnerships. So we're so happy to have you here, Michelann, and over to you. Oh, you're muted.
I see that regular basis. I'm sure my students wish that I was muted every once in a while as well. So one of the things that I love to do to set the stage with my students and to really establish a context is to always have some sort of a read aloud at my fingertips. Many years ago, when I was in the Faculty of Ed, I had a professor who said, every single student, every day, a good story. And that is something that I've truly taken to heart. And it doesn't matter what I'm teaching, whether it's elementary, all the way through to PhD work, or even doing presentations, I always start with a read aloud. So I'm going to do that today. And this one is based on a book called A Letter from Your Teacher. I did send it out to my students prior to even teaching this year as a postcard to welcome them into the program and to give them a little bit of a teaser of what they could come to expect in my course. So this is a little welcome note I want to share with you. Believe all that I'm about to say because every word is true. There are a few important things I'd like for you to know. All throughout the semester, our relationship will grow. I cannot wait to get to know you and all the things that make you you. Do you play sports or like to draw? Maybe you even do Kung Fu. I'd like to meet your family and hear the places you've been. I want to know your favorite subject and see awards that you may win. I promise every morning to virtually greet you with a smile. We'll find a way to give high fives or fist bump if that's your style. I will share with you when you have exciting news, like I finally got my placement or I figured out the clues. I'm here so you can learn a lot of theory, style, and planning. I'll help you with your management and all the needs you will be scanning. But learning is not just about the coursework that we do. Some values that I hope you'll gain are empathy and kindness too. You can also be respectful by listening with your ears and eyes. Follow directions the first time and take good care of your supplies. I want you to set high goals and persevere through any test. When it comes to working hard, I expect you'll try your best. Some days may be a challenge. You may think, I just can't do it. Even when you cannot yet, I'm here to help you through it. I'm going to try to make you laugh and put a smile on your face. We will make learning lots of fun. This is our happy place. I'm excited that you're here. Day by day, I hope you'll see I love being your professor, and you mean so much to me.
Thanks, Michelann. I always enjoy hearing your read alouds, and I can attest that yes, she does use that with PhD students. It was a staple in our courses. So thank you for that. So we'll introduce our third panelist, and I have had the privilege of introducing her before. And she is a dear friend of mine, and I'm just so grateful to hold this space with you. So Dr. Sarah Hunter is an emerging researcher, a mindfulness practitioner, a student affairs professional, and an Ontario certified teacher. Sarah recently received her PhD in educational sustainability from Nipissing University. She currently works at Georgian College as a researcher. She teaches in the B.Ed and M.Ed program at Lakehead University, and she also works in the nonprofit sector. She truly does it all. So welcome, Sarah, and thank you again for being here with us today.
Thank you, and it is a pleasure to be here and in such wonderful company. So one of the things I thought I would share today as we begin is the arrival practice that I embed in my synchronous and asynchronous classes. So here today, we will facilitate the arrival practice synchronously together, and asynchronously, this often looks like a recording for my students that greets them at the beginning of the week and welcomes them into the week, a video that they can press play on, and a practice that they can enjoy when they have the opportunity to. So what I thought we would do first is begin with a really small introduction to what mindfulness is, and perhaps debunk what mindfulness is not. Sometimes there is the perception that mindfulness is about feeling happy, relaxed, and synonymous with being at a spa. And a lot of students that I work with will share that they've tried mindfulness, or that they've been told by a practitioner that they should practice mindfulness, but will be really quick to say that it didn't work for them. And I've really got curious about this. And what I've discovered for a lot of students who've tried the practice and practitioners that I work with, that it's this misconception of not feeling great as soon as they begin practicing, or not being able to quiet the mind. So mindfulness has two components. There is an awareness practice, so becoming aware of the present moment. And then there's an acceptance component, and that is accepting the present moment as it is without judgment. So becoming mindful really is about paying attention with attention. And it is a muscle that is built slowly over time. So one of the things that I think is really important as an educator is to embed small practices in the classroom, whether it be synchronously or asynchronously, so that students can begin to develop that muscle, and that they can try the practice in a way that is really layered with scaffolds, so that they understand that it's not about feeling a certain way, but rather that the practice is about beginning to better understand how it is you do feel. And then once you have that awareness, how can you move towards acceptance? And really, that is the practice of meeting yourself where you're at. Something that we try to do as educators, meeting our students where they're at. But in order for students to meet themselves where they are, they really need to have a strong feeling or sensation or understanding of where it is they are. So the practice that I would like to walk us through today is a little bit experiential, and I'm going to invite you wherever you are to get comfortable. If you're standing, maybe you want to sit down. If you're sitting down, maybe you want to stand up, or if you're somewhere that's working for you, then just stay there. So this practice will be about 2 to 3 minutes, and I'm always very conscious of keeping these practices brief, so that students have enough of an opportunity to try the practice and enough of an opportunity to know that the practice is ending if they find it challenging. I also present these strategies as a sampler, and I am really quick to tell students that some practices may resonate and some practices may not. And again, it's about getting curious about what works for you. So the practice that we're going to move through today is 3 minutes. So know in the back of your mind that you have the next few minutes here. Once you arrive at a comfortable position, maybe you take a moment just to settle the soles of your feet to the floor. If there's anything around you that's distracting, maybe it's your phone, maybe it's your to-do list, if you can stow it away or put it away. Or maybe there's another little adjustment that you can make to allow yourself to be more present. And then I'm going to invite you to either close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, or to gently bring your eyes down to the floor in front of you, just somewhere that you can return your eyes to if they become distracted. Allow your spine to grow tall and noble, like the trunk of a tall tree. Maybe you soften your shoulders, perhaps unclench the jaw, or just invite a little bit of ease into your body if that feels good. If you can, just take a moment to notice the earth rising up to meet you. Maybe it's feeling the sensation of the earth beneath your bottom or beneath the soles of the feet. Just taking a moment here to notice how the body feels. Maybe it's the first time you've checked in today. How does it feel to be right here, right now? Slowly, when you're ready, shift your focus to your breath. You don't need to breathe in any special way. Trust that your body knows how to breathe. Just notice the rise of the breath and notice the fall of the breath. If you become distracted by thoughts, emotions, or body sensations, just know and trust that this is normal. If you notice your wandering mind, just bring the wandering mind back towards the breath, and back towards this moment. Perhaps you notice the tendency to judge this moment as good, bad, hard, or easy. And see if you can let go of that tendency and instead just notice. Slowly shifting yourself from your breath back to the body. Noticing again how it feels to be here right now. Noticing the air in the room, the earth beneath you. Maybe even beginning to tune into the sounds in your environment as you bring yourself back. Slowly adjusting back to the light in the room if the eyes were closed. Taking any movements that feel good for your body. And then just bringing yourself back to your screen and back to this environment. And we're going to invite you now to bring your fingers to the keyboard and in the chat to share with us one word that describes how you're feeling right now. And again, recognizing that there's no way you're supposed to feel, there's no right or wrong answer, only honest answers. And really the aim within this practice is to notice. How do you feel right now? And if you could share that and then take a moment just to browse through the chat to really notice the range of emotion, the range of experience that exists in the room and space today. And to just know and appreciate that how you feel right now will be honored and accepted in the classroom and learning space today. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. I always enjoy so deeply going through those mindfulness practices with you. You just have a way of grounding us all. So thank you for gifting us with that. So I'm going to pass it over to Heather to jump in a little bit more into these strategies. But one piece that I wanted to highlight and why we asked these three incredible educators to share with us some beginning practices is really to reiterate that idea of being present. Yes, in a sense of mindfulness, as Sarah's sharing, but also in the sense of being present in a community of inquiry, which really is what your classroom is, whether you're teaching face-to-face, whether you're teaching asynchronously online, or whether you're teaching synchronously online, or some combination of that. And the other piece is to recognize that part of our roles as educators is to create those connections and that community, and that we need to recognize learners as whole people, right? They don't just come into our class for an hour, for 2 hours. They're bringing with them what happened that morning, right? What phone call did they get? Did they hear about a family member who's recently been diagnosed with COVID? So there's all of these pieces that making sure you can find those moments to connect, to check in, really are to drive that learning community, which is ultimately which is what we're here to talk about today. So thank you again for sharing, and I'll pass.
Perfect. I'm not sure if Sarah's internet cut out for anyone else, but I think we got the gist. I have a question from the chat for Anne specifically before I go into my next question. And that was linking back to some of the practices you use to introduce learners. The person asks if you use introductions in upper year classes when a cohort has already been working together.
And that is an intriguing question. And we are in the unique position in social work that in year 3 and 4, students do move as a cohort. But interestingly, in the context of the pandemic and teaching online asynchronously, a number of these students are still getting to know each other, although they have had classes together for, this would be if they're in 3rd year, their 2nd year together. So absolutely, I integrate these opportunities throughout. And that's just but one strategy. I have other ways of also getting them to interact with each other. But absolutely, I see this as a practice that has to continue throughout, to continue building that community.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Anne. I'm going to pass it to Michelann first to respond to our question, which is just very simply, what are some strategies that you use for learner empowerment and engagement? Why do you use them, and how have students responded?
Okay, I'm struggling. Just give me 1 second here as I struggle through with my background here. So just before I jump in, I also want to respond to that prior question about building community and getting students to know each other, because I don't think we can ever fully know each other. And one of the things that I have been doing on a regular basis is kind of along the lines of a check-in, but asking my students, what do you want your colleagues to know today? Because today is different than yesterday. And maybe something happened and they can check in with each other and they can support each other. So I think that getting to know each other is a lifelong quest. And as a teacher educator, I want for my teacher educators to know that they check in every single day with their students, and that we never know everything there is to know about each other. And to me, that forms the foundation of care that I share with my students from the very beginning. The reading that I did earlier is adapted from a letter from your teacher. In an ideal world, I would love to send this book out to every single student in the mail, along with a care package for them that I'll show a little bit later. But here in fiscal restraint and everything else, what I can do is I can send it out as a postcard. I can send it out as a read aloud. I can read aloud on YouTube, and I can let the students know that I'm thinking about them before the course even begins. And so I really am thinking about them before the course ever begins. And I know as faculty, we kind of jokingly say, you know, it really is in the syllabus. It's there. It will always be there. But I mean it. I have things in my syllabus that speak directly to students. I have learned to narrate my syllabus, to talk to the students, to let them know who I am, to ask them right up front, what kind of experience do you want from this course? Can you let me know? I've tried my best to plan all of these things into the course because this is what my belief system is. And this is all in my syllabus. These are the things that I wish my students knew. And so I thought, well, if I really wish they knew it, I should explicitly tell them what I'm thinking. And so I talked to them right up front about the fact that I've built Indigenous ways of knowing right into my outline, that Bloom's taxonomy is here, that multiple intelligences and learning skills, learning styles are here. So I tell them that. But then the corresponding is I offer them the opportunity to tell me what they wish I knew. And I run the gamut. I get I wish my teacher knew that I'm really struggling with anxiety. I wish my teacher knew that I lost my dad last year and I haven't had an opportunity to grieve yet because of COVID. And I get all of those types of things. But then I'm also finding that I'm getting notes like, I wish my teacher knew that I love having these online classes because most of my classes are asynchronous and I love the option to show up for class. That being said, I have to put my class up asynchronously, synchronously, and I also put it up in a text format for the readers in my group. These are the types of things that I wish my students knew that I now know that they know and that they're exposed to. So I put right up front, this is what a continuum of engagement looks and sounds like. And I do the positive as well as the negative, because I've come to understand that empowerment is about making choices. And the way that students are going to engage are going to range from disengaging all the way up to flowing with course content. And empowering them means that they have a right to pass. They have a right to withdraw. They have a right to disengage. But then the corresponding result of that is in that they also have a right to fail. I care a whole lot about what my students are doing in my course. And I try to inspire them to care as much as I care. I show them right up front what our journey is going to look and sound like. And so in our journey, we have 9 stops that range from the teacher factor all the way up to culturally responsive management in the classroom. These little symbols that you see then get carried forward into our list of readings, into every single week. And then we also see them again in their learning tasks each week. Because I want them to succeed, I show them that success is a continuum, just like engagement is a continuum. And from the very basic, we're not there yet, you're a Yeti, all the way up to being, and I can't see because my people are underneath, all the way up to being an eagle and wow, you're in the flow. Being level 4 is the goal, but recognizing that they come in, many of them come in as Yetis, is okay as well. And we can get you there if you care and if you're willing to engage. Oops. I have a really predictable class structure. Now, not predictable in the sense that every single thing happens in the exact same order every single week, but it's predictable in the sense that students know that they can count on having all of these things in every single class. And what's really interesting is if I have saved my movie for the very last part of today's class, I have at least 20 students in my chat stream saying, was there a movie clip today? Have we gotten to that movie clip? And so mixing it up on a regular basis actually helps me to know who's engaged and how they're engaged. Like Sarah and Anne, I always have a daily check-in. So last week, my daily check-in was, how are you feeling today? And so the little image that says check-in, I used Mentimeter, and the students put their feedback into Mentimeter, which then produced a word cloud. I can see really quickly here that coming in after practicum, I have a group of students who are anxious, overwhelmed, tired, stressed. Some of them are hungry. So when we got to our brain break for the day, instead of saying, okay, we're all going to do this brain break together, I recognized that some were hungry and I offered them choice. And so some of them took their brain break and they went to get something to eat. I also saw on there that their Google task, their accountability task, was too long this week. And so I took that 5 minutes of a brain break and I shortened it up, responding to the students right in the moment. There are multiple paths on our journey, and I mentioned that earlier. So my students can show up for class from 9:30 on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, or they can pick it up on a Google Meet video, they can pick it up on YouTube, they can read it in an auto transcript, they can review it alongside the Google Slides that are posted at the end of the week, and they can also contact me and I will support them through the process. So lots of different pathways, multiple ways to show what they know. So every week they have a Google form. The Google form looks and sounds the exact same every single week. They have to check off all of the expectations, all of the different tasks that I have been asking them to do on an ongoing basis. Their philosophy of classroom management is a draft that feeds directly into their culminating portfolio. If they've been in class, if they have engaged with the course content, if they have empowered themselves, then they have been working on their culminating portfolio from the first time that they entered class. One of my favorite things to do that I've picked up this year, and I started in my doctoral seminar group, was to put together a survival kit, recognizing that every once in a while we all need a little bit of a boost. And so these are some of my favorite things. If I could, I would create this survival kit for every single one of my students. So things like Post-it notes, sidewalk chalk to remind them to create no matter what, no matter where. So a little bit of inspiration blended in with some of the emergency supplies that we need as teachers on a regular basis. I think the last question was, how do students respond? So this is what I'm getting from my students. This is just this week's types of responses. So we were talking about models and theories of behavior. So I had one student who wrote a poem and he showed me everything that he had learned in class and what he had learned in his readings. In the top corner, I have a Post-it. They had to do a pin board on Pinterest. The one in the middle chose to extend our Harry Potter theme, and he came dressed as a Harry Potter professor, and he did a Q&A about all of the behavior models and theories, complete with Harry Potter music in the background, because we had used Harry Potter last week. Snape, everything that you shouldn't do when interacting with students. And there's a YouTube clip out there that is 3 minutes of Snape hating students. Awesome. Another one did a cartoon. And then across the bottom, we have the student who decided to share 5 key messages, and she is prepared to tweet these out. The last one, on a more theoretical basis, is that I asked them to reflect on a reading. And this is what one student talked about. She compared, because she didn't have a practicum in a real classroom this time around, she used our class to reflect on the concept of classroom management, which was really exciting for me to see that she had actually seen all of these key concepts in place in our virtual classroom. So how are the students responding? They do respond well. I will not be so egocentric as to say that I am engaging and empowering 100% of my students, but I would say I have close to 70-75% who are really buying in, and they are taking these types of strategies out into practicum with them. So I asked them from the very beginning to care with me, not care about something, not care as something, but to care with me in an effort to help them care with their students. So I've probably gone over time, but that's what I've got.
No, all good, Michelann. And that was, I don't know, just a really robust way to answer that question with lots of slides, which is your signature move, we know. So yeah, I'm just going to pass it, I guess, to Sarah next. So Sarah, what are some of the strategies you've used for learner engagement and empowerment? Why do you use them? And how have students responded?
Yeah, that's great. And I so appreciate sharing after Dr. Michelann Parr. I've had the pleasure of being in Dr. Parr's class. And, you know, as you were sharing all of this, it really deeply resonated in terms of what engagement looks like and how it is synonymous with care in my own experience. When an educator cares about you and creates the space for you to show up as you are, I think it really creates the conditions for empowerment and engagement. So I will bring us back to the check-in practice that I shared, the small mindfulness practice. And I think it's the first strategy I'll share in terms of how I set the stage for what that will look like in my class. And very, very true to the fear of students not knowing what to expect, I really work to create consistency through the classroom experience, whether it's asynchronously or synchronously. So students always know when they arrive to my classroom that they will experience the moment to arrive, and that practice will be facilitated by me, and that it will take between 3 to 5 minutes. And over time, some of my students do offer to begin to facilitate the practices. So I always leave that offer open that I will facilitate as long as students would like. But if they would like to try on for fit, bringing a strategy to the class, that they can do that. And in most of my classes, students do take that on themselves. And I'm going to screen share here one of the pieces that I follow up with this practice, which is the emotions thermometer. So this is an adaptation that was adapted by the folks at Waypoint Center for Mental Health Care. And this is part of their staff initiative to help build social and emotional intelligence in the workplace. And just as I share with students the what is mindfulness and what is mindfulness not, I also help contextualize it in social and emotional development. So this idea of self-management and self-awareness as foundational to relationship building skills and social skills. So in order to develop those skills, we really have to know how we feel. And this adaptation of Mark Brackett's ruler is a scale of 1 to 5. Some students will resonate with the number, some students will resonate with the color, some will resonate with the happy face / unhappy or sad face. And I find students really use this language later on in class. So how do they respond? We'll do a check-in after we watch a video or after we engage with a concept, and I'll see numbers in the chat. So I'll get a bunch of 3s. And although I didn't ask them necessarily how they felt, they're using this to start to check in with what they're enjoying, what they're engaging with, or what they're not engaging with. And this really creates a language for adults to talk about how they feel. And, you know, sometimes my fear in doing this work, I used to do this work in an elementary school setting, was that my adult learners were going to find this juvenile, or that they were going to not be able to see themselves in these practices. And what I've learned in, for example, this emotions thermometer, this is used with practitioners who provide mental health care services to check in on their own well-being. This emotions thermometer, I've done a lot of mindfulness support with York Regional Police. They use this in their work environment to help people stop, pause, check in, note how they feel, giving them language to verbalize how they feel, and then asking them to respond accordingly. If you know how you feel, how are you going to behave or act differently? So the mindfulness practice, or the arrival practice, really is that beginning practice that sets the tone for class. Students will often ask for an arriving practice when they arrive back from break. I support students on practicum, and sometimes I'll do a teaching observation. And as we check in on Zoom, they'll say, Sarah, can we do a quick 5-minute arrival practice? And so students ask for this to set the stage of an interaction. And I think that really is true to how they respond. One thing I'll also share in line with this practice is I've had the opportunity recently to study the efficacy of brief mindfulness practices. And at the start of COVID, we secured funding to look at a program that Waypoint Center for Mental Health Care was using. And they were doing 4 30-minute sessions that were all based on awareness practices. And that's a really short, brief mindfulness intervention. So most mindfulness programs are quite robust. And in just 4 30-minute sessions, they found that resiliency increased, that empathy increased, and that burnout was mitigated. So as I think about bringing these practices into my classroom, I sometimes catch myself wondering, is a little bit going to move the needle on their well-being? And I think this is the evidence that I needed to really better understand that small amounts are very powerful. And that I always invite my students to leave class with a recording of the practice or a written out version so that they can use it with the people they're working with, or that they can revisit the practice again to continue to build that habit. So the next thing that I would share is very different from an arrival practice, but it's really how we sit together in class. So I use the talking circle format often to have conversations. And when we moved to the online environment, I was quite taken back as to how to do this on Zoom. How do I bring all of my students together? So normally in class, I'd be the teacher in class half an hour before my students arrive, dragging the desks around and then putting all of the chairs in a circle. And on Zoom, I simply open up a Jamboard and I put a circle, and then all of my students put their names there. And it doesn't look neat and pretty. Somebody put a happy face in the middle. Somebody moved me to a different spot because they wanted to sit next to one of their peers. And they're all doing this live. And it's as if we were sitting around a big kitchen table together. And then in class, what we do is we share one person at a time with this visual on the screen. So if I begin, I will pass the talking piece either to my right or to my left, and each student will share and we'll move through the circle. They have the right to pass, which they know. And I use a scaffold by at the beginning asking them to check in with how they feel. So that emotions thermometer will be done here. And we pass the talking piece and we each share how we're feeling. So it's one word. A little bit later in class, I'll provide a talking prompt that invites them to share a sentence. And then later on in class, I might ask them to speak more openly to something. So again, we've scaffolded. By the time we're 15 minutes into a synchronous class, it's my hope that every student has had the chance to speak out loud, at least just one word, so that they know that their voice is part of the classroom. And how does this work in bigger classes? Might be a question you're wondering. So this is one of my smaller classes where I only have 20 students. In my larger classes, I'll do this circular format up to 40 people. And then as soon as we move beyond 40, we'll do this in breakout rooms. So we'll model this in a small group, or we'll do this as a fishbowl. So 4 people will be in the center of the circle and they'll be having a conversation on Zoom, and all of their peers will be bearing witness or holding space for their conversation as active listeners. And then the last piece that I would just plant a seed on that I've recently adopted is engagement-based grading. So this is a new practice to me, and it's something I'd be happy to speak to anybody about that shows interest or would like to further explore what this could look like. And I could share my course syllabi. But basically here, students are given different engagement levels at the very start of the term. So I've only included a few here for you to see. So from 65 all the way to 95, there's different pots of engagement that students can choose based on their time, based on their availability, and based on their aspirations for the course. And based on what they choose, they sign up for an engagement level. And then I work to support them through that path in the course. So it really is a bit of a choose your own adventure. And it can be based on what students are willing to put in and give in that class. It's provided a lot of opportunity for students to choose a lower path of engagement so that they can engage in something else in their life that might be equally rewarding or professionally really supportive of where they want to go in their career. The other piece of this is that students can choose to change paths. So this will allow a student midway through the semester who experiences something in life to come back to me and say, you know what, I think this is the class that I can choose a different path forward through and know that I can complete a different version of the final assignment that won't be as robust. All of the student engagement levels do include the core components that will meet the learning objectives in the course. And I'll stop there and pass it on now.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Sarah. And I really liked how you mentioned the virtual and in-person ways to do these strategies. We did have a question in the chat, but I think you answered it in your question, and Michelann also answered it in the chat, and that's been copied over to YouTube. For those who are watching live, please continue to send your questions our way, because after Anne, we will have more of an open space for a Q&A. So Anne, last but not least, what are some of your strategies for learner empowerment and engagement? How do you use them? And what has the impact been on students?
Thank you. Well, as I've been listening to Michelann and Sarah, I've been drawing a lot of parallels in terms of some of our primary focus and what our intentions are. So in my case, I'm looking at strategies to engage diverse learners as well as diverse systems of knowledge. And that's embedded throughout all of my courses. So I also have to, of course, devise strategies to reflect that then in my teaching practices. So some of the things that the parallels I've drawn, for instance, Sarah's whole notion of mindfulness, and I'm also very much interested in learners as embodied beings and understanding that learning is an effective process. So I'm very conscious of that. So this whole notion that I'm trying to challenge the idea of learners as disembodied heads, or the way I've heard it described as a head on a popsicle stick. So the strategies I'd like to talk about today involve about the strategies that I use to try and get students immersed in issues of embracing different worldviews, demonstrating that learning can occur in different ways and giving them opportunities to demonstrate how that might be. And also, I very deliberately try to draw on the diverse strengths of students. So as a means of increasing their comfort, understanding that it can be anxiety provoking to be online. So let me just share my screen. It's not being shared, is it?
Not yet. There we go.
Okay, very good. So this is an example of an opportunity I gave students to express themselves in whatever medium they felt fit for them. So they were given some ideas and encouraged to be as creative as they wanted to be. I invited poetry, possibly music. Astoundingly, some of our students are quite adept musicians. I encourage art or images. Storytelling is another option for students. So in this image, this is about a student reflecting on the whole notion of self-reflexivity in practice. And we were specifically looking at the way in which power circulates. So this image stimulated discussion about the importance of one's own positionality, both as an individual, as a professional social worker, and it stimulated a lot of discussion in terms of what that could mean. So people were readily willing to jump in and add their interpretations or add their lived experience or their personal positionality as part of this. This next image was related to the notion of unsettling power. So this was designed to reflect the way in which power operates, often invisibly. And it was specifically designed to explore social work's embeddedness in the historical treatment of Indigenous peoples. So this served to spark discussions about broader systems of privilege and oppression, or how those who enjoy privilege may be shielded from even the knowledge that other people's experiences differ from their own, and that this is all very much embedded in systems, and moving us beyond an individual level interpretation of what's going on, and instead seeing that systems are actually designed in this way to make that possible and to normalize or naturalize that process of ignorance, for instance. And then for something different, I thought I'd bring a few poems. This one, when little faces are held by large calloused hands, we can't stay quiet. When black suits are paid more than long gray pencil skirts, we can't stay quiet. When white noses reach farther than brown hooked noses, we can't stay quiet. When our power is taken, we must remember we can't stay quiet. So as you can see, I've drawn all of these from a singular focus on power. And I have one more poem, a bit longer, called The Unborn Soul. What does it mean to be human? The soul asked the universe. Soul, does it mean we're all created equal? Universe, or so you're told until you're born into a divided world where you didn't get to choose your side. Soul, but we have the power to shape our destiny? Universe, it's very limited in a world that tells you who you should be and who you are. Soul, okay, but at least we have the choice to make our own decisions, right? Universe, it may seem so, but you'll be conditioned from birth to adopt the beliefs of others. Universe, remember this, soul. You will be told that knowledge is power, but ask yourself, who has power over knowledge? You will be taught to help the less fortunate, but ask yourself, who is limiting those less fortunate from helping themselves? You will be told to obey authority as they are your protectors, but ask yourself who they are protecting. You will be given a looking glass in which to see the world, but ask yourself who owns the looking glass. You will be told it is the way it is and always has been, but ask yourself how change is possible. Soul, will I remember all of this when I am human? Universe, not with your mind, but with your heart. So I use these just as a couple of examples of the strategies that I use to engage diversely positioned learners in terms of an asynchronous online environment. And so in terms of how the students respond, it's consistently noted by students that they find, first of all, this shift in focus very engaging. I see an increased level of engagement, and I can judge this based on many weeks they're doing written posts in standard academic form. And in that case, I tend to see the minimum required number of responses, as opposed to when we engage in these different ways, when we use different mediums, I tend to see students more fully engaging. I see more posting, more responses, more discussions emanating out of it. And one of the things that these different ways of discussing the issues provide is for people to then mirror on their own interpretations of it. And in some cases, I also structure the learning in that way. I ask people to create an image or a representation and not tell us what it is, and I open it up to others to then provide their interpretations of what they're seeing. And what I find is in these instances, people are much more willing to bring in their own lenses from their lived experiences, from their positionality. And we do tend to move beyond these Eurocentric canons. So not only are they bringing the cultural knowledge that they may have gleaned from the weekly readings, but people are also bringing their lived experiences from beyond what they've read. And in that way, we really see deeper engagement, more diverse body of knowledge being presented, and increased engagement of students, I would have to say, overall. So I think I should probably let us move now into Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. And thank you for sharing the images and the poetry with us too. Were there any outstanding questions, just to throw it out to our participants? Does anyone have any lingering questions that they'd like to ask these brilliant educators before we wrap up today's session? So as I'm waiting for people to type in, if they're typing in, I have so many thoughts, and I've made like a novel of notes again, because each time I interact with these three people, I just glean so much more. And sort of one of the threads that I noticed through each of the strategies that the three of you use, and just even the way that you describe your teaching and your interactions with your students, is this idea of risk taking, right? And you are taking risks, and COVID has kind of thrust us into this environment in which we need to take greater risks. But you also trust your learners, right? So each of you shared this idea of allowing folks to map out their journeys. And that really does drive engagement, right? Because you're showing up for them, but you're also carving out space for them to show up as they are. And I think that that's one of the most authentic and meaningful and empowering contexts in which you can invite learners in, right? And so the other piece too is each of you shared these different strategies for diving into really complex topics and complicated topics. And I know, with Michelann's idea of a read aloud, that's something that Sarah and I use in our courses with our teacher candidates as an opportunity to have meaningful conversations about challenging topics. Anne's inviting her learners to come in and share through poetry, through art. What does power mean? How is it embedded in, right, our institutions, in the way in which we engage with folks? So it's just such a meaningful and multifaceted way that I'm so grateful that each of you shared sort of those pieces. And the other thing to keep in mind for anyone listening, these are very incredible and engaging strategies, but they may not all, right, suit your context, suit your pedagogy, suit your students. And so we invite you always to find where you fit in this equation. Where do you fit, right? So we all meet our learners where they're at, but we also want to meet you where you're at. And so don't leave today feeling as though you have to, right, uproot everything that you've been doing, but find one or two practices that you might want to try in the winter semester, and just let those ideas bubble up, right, and get curious about that. So I don't think we have any questions. I didn't see any come in, just a lot of thanks. And I will echo that. So I am deeply grateful to each of you, and Sarah and Michelann, for coming and sharing with us your experiences, your wisdom, your brilliance, your time. I always enjoy having conversations with each of you, and it's just been such a joy to have a collaborative conversation. So thank you again. And to everyone watching, don't forget, I will also do a shameful plug. We have our final teaching talk next Wednesday at noon, December 1st. And we're going to be chatting about pandemic fatigue and burnout, which is a pretty timely topic of conversation. And then just a shout out to Rob and Chris and Sam behind the scenes, making everything flow and function smoothly for us. So thank you again, and we'll see everybody next week. Bye for now.
We always recommend running an up-to-date version of Google Chrome when using Blackboard and Blackboard Collaborate Ultra.